Hi, and welcome to the National New Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University, and I'm your host, Dr. Terry Ross. Today, new teachers, I am so excited that we're starting season 2, and we're starting season 2, episode 2, with Miss Taylor Price. She's a teacher here in our city, and I'm so excited to have her with us today. When I met Miss Price and talked with her about the podcast, I asked her, what advice would you give new teachers? And Ms. Price immediately said, the reflective process, understanding self-reflection and how to move forward in your craft by reflecting and not sitting with all of that feedback and being offended or not knowing what to do with it. So I was so excited about that. And new teachers being able to reflect is so important to your to the process of teaching, to you getting better, and to you becoming the great teacher that you got into education for. If we cannot reflect and look at what we did and how we need to move forward, we'll kind of stay stuck and stagnant in a place. And it's something that you want to not only practice for yourself, but practice in front of your students so that they can know how to reflect and how to look at their work and move forward. So, Ms. Price, will you please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and how did you get to this point?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much again, Mr. Ross, for having me on and just allowing me to come to this platform. I greatly appreciate it. I am officially a second year teacher. This is officially my third year in education. I spent a year training with Memphis Teacher Residency before I came into my own classroom and got the opportunity to learn the ropes of this amazing profession that we're in, thankfully with a mentor teacher. And that is truly where I learned the value of reflection and the value of being open to just being a learner and accepting feedback and utilizing it so that way I can show up as my best self for my students.
This is so exciting because I did not know that you are going into your third year. When you said the reflective process, that made me think like, well, okay, she's very seasoned. She understands how to move forward. So this is even more exciting that they'll hear from a colleague who's just 2 years ahead of them. And New Teacher University, we're actually geared toward first through third year teachers and teachers that need a boost. So it's for everyone, but we're especially focused on first through third year teachers because we focus on teacher retention. If you come into the profession, we want you to stay. We need you. Our children need you. And to bring it closer, the country needs you, because a country without teachers, a country without an education base is a country that's not moving very far. So you need to be educated. So we need you educating our children. So Ms. Price, let's get into it. Let's talk about the reflective process.
So that reflective process, as I mentioned, this is only my third year in education, and this will be my second year by myself. But the thing that carried me the most throughout that first year is just being open to thinking about what it is that I'm doing, the feedback that I'm getting from other people, and being willing to just be reflective and think about it on my own terms. One of the first things that I really embraced and held on to, and one of the first things that I think all new teachers should recognize about reflection is that reflection is what builds confidence. The only way to build confidence in your practice is by thinking about what went right, thinking about what went wrong, and then going further to think about the why behind each. Reflecting is that one toolkit that you have mentally that allows you to have a peace of mind about your practice at the end of the day. When those hard questions come, you have assuredness in the choices that you made because you've already thought about them. You thought about, why was it a good choice that I made this? Why was this probably not a good choice that I made it? You can give the explanation for yourself. So that way, if anybody comes and asks you a question about it, you're prepared. You don't feel blindsided. You don't feel like you're being attacked. You have the bravery to say, I have made this choice for these particular reasons, or you have the bravery to say that I made this choice. I probably won't do this again. And then confident in the fact that just because it didn't go right and you might not do it again doesn't mean that you're not going to try something else. That is what gives you the assuredness, the reflection piece of it. That is what builds your confidence in it.
And I love that you said the first thing about it is that it builds your confidence. And I love the fact that you called it a tool for your toolkit, because we think of tools in our toolkits as something like these worksheets or this
Mhm.
timer, different things that we have. But the reflective process is something that doesn't cost money.
Yes.
Yes, you need some training in it, because I'm sure someone helped you to understand how to use
Yes.
it and how to make it work for you. But the fact that you consider it a tool, and I consider it to be any of our most powerful tool that we have,
Mhm.
because it's the plan, do, act process. What did I do? How did it come out? What can I do better the next time? So thank you so much for sharing that. What else would you say about the reflective process that could really help new teachers?
I would say that moving into, like you said, I was taught and, had practice in doing it. Reflection is a tool because it helps you reflect on why it is that you need to do all of the little things. You have the timer, you have the worksheet, you have all of the guiding resources that you need, but why? What did it do for you? What made this helpful? And then once you go through that initial piece and you figure out the why behind that, eventually you get to the point in the year that I'm sure a lot of new teachers are nervous about, because I was nervous about it for sure, is the piece where you become you become the person who's being evaluated. It's essentially your testing time. We give our students assessments. We expect them to perform. We expect them to meet the criteria. We expect for them to do the things to get that high score. For us, that's when we get our evaluations. And I can't understate how sometimes that is stressful. And when you're a first year teacher, it's even more daunting, because until you learn your paces about yourself and you get into a practice of thinking about the work that you're doing without prompting, it's almost worrisome that it feels personal, and it's not. And you have to take the tools that you have and then apply all of that to that, that process of framing evaluations that you get.
Yes.
Because thinking through your practice is what's going to prepare you to receive and intentionally integrate any feedback that you get.
Yes. And you mentioned figure out your why. What
Mhm.
does that do for new teachers, for them to begin to do that early on in the process?
If you start with your why, you are a lot more purposeful about what you put in front of your students. You're a lot more purposeful about what it is that I'm doing this for. Because on the days where the lesson didn't go right, the lesson isn't perfect, the kids are probably having a day, everybody's super chatty and it's not moving the way you want it to. If you don't have that why, you don't have a reason to recenter and just, let me think about why I'm here. Let me refocus, let me repurpose, and then let me move forward and let's, make the adjustments. Your why is what you start with. As a lot of teachers get ready to go, into the school year, a lot of us are going to do these different practices and trainings where people are going to ask you to identify, why are you here? Why are you here? What is your purpose? What's the word that sticks out behind why you're doing this work? It seems cheesy and it seems like, oh, why are we doing this? But that word or that reason that you come up with before you even see a kid come through your door at the beginning of the year, it is truly what will drive you through the days as you go along with what you're doing. And then when you put it in terms of reflection, that is the key. That why and that paired with your reflection, that's the key to the sustainment. That's the
Yes.
key to the retention. If
Yes.
you don't think about that why, and if you don't put into plan different tools, different procedures, different routines, whatever the case may be, so that way you can sustain it, then you're not going to want to come back, because you're not going to be able to think back and say, let me think about this moment. Let me
Yes.
think about that moment that this student learned something that they thought that they couldn't. And it's because I planned for it. It's because I thought about them. It was because I was intentional with what I did with them. That's what motivates you to stay. But you don't get to that point until you think everything through.
Yes, you answered my next question for you, because I just wrote down the reflective process through planning. How do
Mm.
you intentionally use the reflective process when you're planning?
When I'm planning, I like to incorporate not just student data that is received, may it be formal, like formal data or summative. I also like to think about just the observations that you have about students because that is data too.
Yes.
Um, that the day to day, little practices that your students do, the little
Uh-huh.
things that they do to indicate that, oh, I'm getting it today. And that little thing that they do when they start talking and bouncing around because you don't get it, that's data for you too. So
Yes.
when you're planning, where the reflection piece comes into is as I'm making this PowerPoint and as I'm picking my materials for today, I need to consider that I might have to add in another piece to this. You may have to create some forms or methods of differentiation in order to meet the needs of all of your students.
Hmm.
And sometimes that differentiation might be you need to add in an element of physical annotation because even though we're working on a computer today, somebody in your class might not do well with their computer. They may need pencil, paper, highlighter because that's just not working. But you don't know that if you don't take the time to debrief and really think about your students' needs, not just from this is what the test scores data says, but also from a what does my student do day in and day out perspective. And then also think about your tools as a teacher. What can I do? What can I provide in order to meet that student where they're at and then bring them up to where I need them to be?
Yeah, so you're looking at the reflective process, not just reflecting on your skill set, but you're also getting to know your students and getting
Yeah.
to know the environment and what times of day certain things are happening with them. So
Mm-hmm.
being reflective over the entire day, over the entire process is a healthy habit for teachers.
It is. And honestly, that is a lifesaver because I think this year, one of the things that I found your relationships with students some days is going to take you further than any amount of just hard going planning you can do because you can plan a day perfectly and on paper and on that PowerPoint it looks great, but if you haven't put the thought into your kids emotional capacity, if you haven't put the thought into they're coming to me at this time of day and I know that all of these things have happened in a day, you can't pivot the way that you would like to pivot in order to get through that lesson that you've perfectly curated and put
Yes.
together. Because some days it may just be you get to slide 3 and you realize that whole classroom is not with you. I know my kids. What do I need to stop and do right here to reach them and say, hey, I see we're not here. What do we need to do? Do we need to
Yes.
take a minute? Do we just need to take a minute and just put our head down and just breathe? Do we need to find a song to listen to and just let everybody sing because maybe we need to sing some Tevin Campbell and can we talk? Maybe you just need
Yes.
to scream that and feel that for a minute, okay? And I'm gonna let you sing it. I'm gonna let you feel it. If that means that once that song ends, we can go back into doing this lesson and getting through the things that we need. But I can only know that that's going to work with my students if I have truly put in that time to think about them, to reflect on the things, the little habits that they have. What are the things that they like? What are the things that they don't like? And then for me as a teacher, what are the things that I can release control here? I can ease up a little bit here and provide that emotional support to them so that way when we get to the academic piece,
Yes.
they're more willing to engage with that content.
Absolutely. So, did you start digging into your reflective process your first year? Was it more into your second year?
It was going into my first solo year last year, but where I truly learned that practice was through my mentorship time when I was with Memphis Teacher Residency. A lot of that time spent was a lot of time with my mentor teacher
Yes.
and one of my coaches sitting me down after every lesson. What do you think went well today? What do you think we can grow in today? Giving me the space to prompt me essentially think what happened today. What are the things that went well? What are the things that happened? And when I told them those things, that's not where the conversation stopped. The conversation then went to why did this thing go well for
Right.
you? Can
Okay.
you look back at your lesson plans and see hey, I plan for this to happen. And I also plan for this pivot just in case because I know my students. So I also plan for that. And that's how come this was successful for today. And then on the flip side of things that probably didn't go as well, I'm thinking, when they ask me why, I'm thinking maybe I didn't plan for that the way that I should have. How can we go back to the drawing board so I can fix this before my next class period? I'm thinking about why isn't this, this may have worked for one class. Why does this need to change for this particular class?
Mm-hmm.
I was constantly prompted to think about my actions and also write it down. And because I was
Mm-hmm.
able to do that in a space where I had a mentor teacher and had people prompting me in that direction, when
Mm-hmm.
it came time for me to do it on my own, it's kind of ingrained. It
Yes,
takes
second nature.
it's your second nature because all of a sudden it's that lovely clipboard that you're carrying around class with all day. Keep an extra spare piece of paper because the things that are needing change of, write them down in the moment. That's a part of the reflection. Let me write it down. Let me
Okay.
figure out what needs to pivot, what needs to change. Can I fix it really quickly between transitions, or am I going to have to wait until my planning period and we just try it again
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, or try it again with the next class period? That it takes repetition. It takes repetition and just knowing that it's okay to ask yourself what went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
what went right, and then again asking yourself why. After every single instance, ask yourself why, because that's how you get to the root of it.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that it takes repetition because we talk about repetition for our students. It
Mm-hmm.
takes repetition for us as well. It takes
Yes.
repetition for us as well. So thank you. So the first reason that we need to be reflective is that it builds confidence. What's next?
It needs to build confidence. The second reason is something we tapped into just a little bit, but something that I think is very, very, very important and critical. And that's because it not only builds confidence, but it also helps us frame the way we go about getting those evaluations back.
Yes.
Like you touched on, you kind of said the point for me. Reflection allows you to take feedback from a place of openness and intentionality instead of this place of being defensive and seeing it as a personal attack. And the caveat to that as well is when you learn how to operate in that space of, you know what, this is on this rubric. I did do this, I did do that, and it's okay. Let me put it in my back pocket for me to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to, do that.
Yeah.
Once you figure out how to take, evaluations from that place and that perspective, when evaluation and feedback does become personal, you're able to spot it. And it's not, you don't feel like you're questioning yourself. You don't feel like, you're the one who's just reading things wrong. You truly know the difference between effective and constructive feedback versus something that may be otherwise, regardless of who it comes from. It can come from a mentor, it can come from admin, it can come from another teacher who you're just asking for
Or a
that help
parent
from.
or a student. Yes.
Or a parent, oh my gosh, you're a parent or a student. A
Yes.
student will be your first evaluator on any and everything.
Yes.
They will tell you, oh, I didn't like that. Don't take it personal. Don't take it
Yes.
personal.
Yes.
Just what didn't you like? What happened? And you might find, like I said, you'll learn the difference because when you ask them why, some students will tell you a legitimate reason. And it's like, well, we did a lot of reading today, but typically we're a little bit more hands-on in this class. And it may make you think, okay, true.
Mm-hmm.
How do I need to pivot so that way they're not just sitting there listening to me talk for an entire class period, but instead give them a little bit more ownership on this because clearly
Absolutely.
they're ready for it. So how can I give that to them? Versus because I'm not going to take that personal because that's something that can help them learn and understand this content. So
Absolutely.
I'm not going to take that personal. But then, when they come in, we're just like, oh, this was lame. This was boring. Because they love that. They love telling you
Yes. 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 Yes.
everything's lame. Everything's boring.
Yes.
Nothing is cool. When you hear that, you could just say, oh, I'm sorry. And then just, let it go and
Right.
let it go.
Right.
But if you don't know how to make the distinction, that lame and boring, you will take that to heart. You
Mm-hmm.
truly will. You will take it to heart and feel like you're not doing your job and you're not doing it correctly. But you really have to be able to unpack and reflect on was it really important, or was this kid just not interested in this today? Did this lesson and its requirements not meet the pinnacle of where their attention span goes? You
Yes,
know,
and you may have to explain to them that yes, today we are doing more reading. It is a little bit more, but this is this piece, and I need you all to really get this and stay focused. So I love that you said that, because sometimes we do need to explain to students that yeah, we're going to have to do this today. Oh yeah, I know we had more activities yesterday, and we'll get back into it tomorrow. And that's so important that you have that type of relationship, that your students can say that, and you
mm-hmm.
can tell them why.
Yes, and like that just goes back to that first point that we talked about reflection as a confidence builder. You feel better justifying your choices, even
Yes.
justifying the choice to a child. You don't want to just the answer being just because I said so. That pushes them away because
Yes.
then they feel like they cannot communicate things to you because you've iced them out because you're defensive now.
Yes.
So they don't want to tell you those things. But when they come to you and then they're like, this is lame, this is boring, you know that the reason you made that instructional choice is because, hey, as much as I want everything to be fun, when you sit down in front of that computer for that state test at the end of the year, this is how it's going to look. It's not
Absolutely.
fun. It's pretty lame. It's pretty boring.
Yes.
But
Long
that's the
passages.
work. But that's the work that is going to
Yes.
be asked of you to do. So you have to practice doing the actual thing that you're going to do. We can't always do the fun version of it. Sometimes we just have to do the practical version that reflects the actual work. And you
Yes.
feel okay saying that to them. And because if we are leaning into this practice of our children are going, we need to model for them what we expect of them, they don't have a problem hearing your justifications and
Right.
explanations. And they know because you as an adult are willing to give them that very sound, very clear explanation, they don't have a problem now when you ask them, hey, why is this the decision we're making? Why is this, the thing that we're doing? They give you that same openness and energy back because they know that you would do the same thing for them.
Absolutely. And we need to know their why as well. And that's I go back to your first point about building confidence and knowing your why, because you do need to be able to tell your students what you're doing, why you're doing it, because they want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do give them that cut, because we have to do it, because it's the test. No, have a way that you can attach it to their life, attach it to why they need it. So I really like that. And what was your final point for the reflective process?
My final point for the reflective process, I think, is the major reason why we're here, why we're doing podcasts and talks like this, is that reflecting is your key to sustaining this. That is the one way, this is the one way that you ground yourself in children. It is the one way you ground yourself in your purpose. It is the only way to get through a school year, removing ego from anything. It's very easy, I think, to lose sight of the main thing because when you talk about when you're in a school environment, you are not just in the face of kids all day. You are also with adults. You may have just left before your hardest class of the day. You probably just left the break room and everybody is talking about every single thing that is going wrong in this school today. And
Yes.
then by the time you get to your next class, and that's the class that sometimes is the hardest to get through for one reason or another, you already feel defeated because you've already just been kind
Yes.
of like indoctrinated in the ego and indoctrinated in like this sense of helplessness because that unfortunately sometimes just happens in such large, hectic environments. But when you take a moment to think about your why, when you take a moment to think about all of the work that you've already put in to that lesson and put into these kids, all of that goes away. They become the focus. They are the reason you're doing this. And then you also remember that I'm the person who is able to provide this experience for them. Regardless of whatever else is going on, when they come into my space, they know that they are here with someone who loves them, who cares for them, who wants to focus their energy into their learning and them being the best version of themselves.
Yes.
When you believe that and when you ground yourself in that, your kids pick up on that. They
Yes.
notice it. they embrace it, they take it in. They'll do the hard things for you because they know that you do the hard things for them too.
Yeah,
It all goes hand in
it
hand.
goes
But
hand in hand.
you just don't get to that point automatically. You don't get to that point without the consistent repetition of thinking about, why am I here? What am I doing? And then consistently doing the work of just going from saying it and thinking it to actually putting it into practice.
Absolutely. How important is laughter in the reflective process? Because when I was thinking about this podcast, I thought about how I laugh at myself sometimes. Say, Terry, why did you do that? Or why did you make that choice? And I just laugh. And it's important to be able to laugh at yourself because we're not perfect. We're going to make some choices that's going to make you cringe sometimes in those couple of years.
Yes. Laughter is everything. I laugh at myself all the time. And because I laugh at myself, I'm able to shake it off. It's just like,
Yes.
man, it's kind of almost like it inevitably happens where one day you're walking through class, everybody's doing work, you call yourself doing rounds, somebody's backpack is in the center of the aisle. You've known that backpack is in the aisle and you called yourself avoiding it, and still you managed to do a little trip, do a little something. And next thing you know, all the kids cracking up. Oh my gosh, she
Yeah.
is laughing at me. I'm gonna laugh at myself too. Because
Yeah.
I saw that backpack there and I still managed to trip over it. The
Yes.
same thing goes into your practice. You think about little activities that you may have tried, activities that you did, because at the time it was like, oh, this is going to get them engaged. This is going to be the
Yes.
thing that does it. This is going to be the thing that revolutionizes teaching. Like, this is it. And then when you think back on it, you was like, I wasted a whole instructional day doing that. Just for them to not even get what I wanted them to get from it or whatever the case may be. But you just have to laugh at yourself because you
Yes.
did it in good faith. You really
Yes.
truly have the best intentions, but it's just not the way it played out. And when you find the joy in it and you're able to laugh at it and not, shrivel up or see it in this bad light, you're more willing to try something else crazy again.
Yes.
Because just because this thing is the thing that I'm laughing at myself about, and I'm like, why did I do it? The next thing might be something that could turn into something I laugh about, but it also could be the thing that I keep with me. I stick with it. I do this every single year now because it might be silly, but it turned out great.
And that's so important because if you don't laugh at yourself when you do things like that, you plan this wonderful lesson and it just falls on its face. You have to laugh at those things because you'll say, I put all of that work into it and they didn't enjoy it. I'm not going to do it again. That's the worst thing you want to say. Through the reflective process, you say, what could I have done better? How can I tweak this? How could I have pivoted or something like that? Because we never want to give up on children because they didn't respond the way we want to respond. Our job there is to get them to respond. So thank you so much for sharing that. Is there any parting words that you'd like to leave with our new teachers about the reflective process or how they can implement it?
I think the biggest thing is for new teachers coming into this profession, especially if this is your first year, there are so many resources that you have to do that reflective piece that aren't necessarily workbooks, workshops, etc. Being able to reflect about your practice with the people and the veterans who are around you is something I cannot overstate. I am only able to think so fondly about what I do and have such an openness to this practice because I've had other teachers be able to be a sounding board for me, give me advice, ask me why. And the only reason I was able to do that with them was because I asked. You are not going to be laughed at. You are not going to be looked at as being unintelligent or as not knowing anything for asking someone for help or for their guidance or for their assistance. If anything, the teachers who you go to ask, they're going to be able to say, she's going to want to stay. He's going to want to stay because he cares. They're going to be the ones to uplift you and give you that encouragement because they see that you care enough to even ask the question.
Absolutely.
So definitely in this whole entire process, when you've thought your way through everything and you still think that there is no foreseeable way that you can get it together, whether it be in lesson planning or in behavioral management, whatever it is. Don't be afraid to go ask for help. Don't be
Right.
afraid to speak up and go to your mentor teachers, go to your other admin leaders in your building who you know will be willing to come in and sit down in your lessons and give you that feedback. Do not be afraid to do that, because that is going to carry so much more weight than you sitting back and not saying anything out of fear. Let it go. Ask those questions. You are going to be better for it. Your students are going to be better for it. And your time in this particular field of work is going to be better for it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. My first year teaching, my background is special education. So I started in the 90s. And this is when high school special education was not where you had the students going into the mainstream and teachers push in. It was pull out. So I was teaching like 4 different subjects: Algebra 1, Geometry, English 1, English 2, and English 3. And so I could handle the Englishes, but algebra, I found an old algebra book that I got for my students, and I taught them all of the terms and the basic formulas. I did that for the first quarter. It was a very old algebra book that I could understand and break down. But then, and even during that time, I was going to the algebra teacher's classroom on my planning period, learning from them. And they really respected me for that. They began to invite me to their meetings and to their sessions that they were having. And my students, after the first quarter, I would ask, could they audit the algebra teacher's class? And my students at the end of the year passed the exit exam, just like the students in Gen Ed. And it was because I was not afraid to ask the question. I put the extra time in. I mean, you're at work anyway. Yeah. So why not be good at what you do?
Why not be good at what you do? Or make the effort, go for it. Just because I'm thinking, especially for my tested subject teachers, coming into this, because I teach algebra 1 and algebra 2, not algebra. Oh my goodness, I was thinking about yours. I am definitely an English teacher. You do not want me to teach algebra 1 or algebra 2. I teach English 1 and English 2, and that is just its own whirlwind. So asking those questions allowed for my department, because I was the new girl, and they got to know me that way and saw how much I cared about what I did. And they understood. They were willing to send me resources. When I asked for help, sure, come observe my classroom. Sure, come observe this process. Take as many notes as you need. I'll send you whatever it is that you need, because I was willing to ask. And when you do those tested subjects, so that means you may have a lot more questions coming your way from parents and everyone else in between. You feel more comfortable in that, and so many more people than you probably could ever think of are more willing to help you when you reach out that way.
Absolutely. Well, Ms. Price, thank you so much. This has been priceless, no pun intended.
Thank you.
The new teachers will benefit greatly from this. Thank you so much. And new teachers, thank you for joining us tonight on the National New Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University. I'm your host, Dr. Terry Ross, and make sure you join us on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock for our National New Teacher Meetup, where you can come in and ask live questions. And again, Ms. Taylor Price, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the reflective process and how it has helped you in your career. And it's a short career, but you are leaving a lot of wisdom to be going into your 3rd year. So hats off to your mentor teacher. And let her know that or him, if your mentor teacher, let them know that I'd love to have them as a guest on the podcast to share. I would love that. And thank you so much again for joining us tonight on the National New Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University. Thank you.